Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and improve business processes so companies can scale and thrive. Now, people ask me, what software do I like that I use in order to document processes and procedures? And I'd like to share with you a software that I really like, which is Suite Process. Now, Suite Process is an amazing process documentation software that helps create clear, step-by-step instructions for every task in your company. Anywhere from onboarding new clients to training employees to responding to client requests. With Suite Process, you have a central place for the team to access procedures and instructions anytime and from any device. So, as a loyal listener to this podcast, or even if you just joined us for the first time, you can try this software for free with a 28-day free of charge trial. All you need to do is go to suiteprocess.com/Adi, that's ADI, like my name, and you can sign up for your free trial and start using it today. And today's guest is Ben Childs, the co-founder of Digital Reach Agency, and where they work with businesses in order to create lead generation and increase their digital marketing footprint. So, Ben, great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So tell us a little bit more about Digital Reach.
Yeah, so it was founded about a decade ago, and we've been fully remote ever since, even before everybody went remote. And we started working, we talked about a little bit before, we started working with ultra small businesses, garage door guys, plumbers, stuff like that, to just fix their Google AdWords. It was definitely a different space back then with a lot of companies who maybe weren't very transparent with your data. So it was a great market opportunity for me coming from maybe one of those companies. And ever since, kind of, we've just grown and then hired different specialties, different people who come from different backgrounds. And one of them is B2B SaaS and tech. So we've tripled down over the last 3 or 4 years on B2B SaaS and tech companies. So now we do inbound like SEO and paid media, and back end like marketing automation and CRM and branding and web design for funded startups and enterprises like Cisco, VMware, and some other choice ones. So it's been a ride. And if you had told me a couple of years ago what we'd be doing now, I wouldn't have believed you.
Absolutely. Yes. It definitely sounds like quite a ride from your apartment in San Francisco, starting with small, ultra small businesses to working with Cisco. And that's what we're talking today. It's because you really, you walk the walk. You started from basically yourself and probably the rest of the co-founders. And now you have a team of 35 employees. You're working with big companies. And you are remote. So that's good, because then we want to talk about that. And you have systems. I mean, that's how you basically grew the companies, by implementing those systems. So let's start with that. Tell us a little bit about the systems that you use in order to scale the business.
Yeah, so the first thing that really worked, I would say, was about 8 years ago, maybe a little less, is we were only working in Google Ads. And I was using like pen and paper and just going in and just trying to do kind of whatever was latest and loudest, if I could remember to do it. And so we talked about Asana. We love Asana. Kind of one of the things that I did is I just kind of like spent like, I want to say like 3 straight days, like just drinking coffee, thinking, Googling, looking back at my notes and saying like, what is the minimum viable product of something you have to do in a Google Ads account to move it forward? So how can you get in front of the fires by making sure, like, every quarter you check their settings, every day you check the bid adjustments, every week you check the ad rotation, stuff like that. And so I just built a process of daily, weekly, biweekly, monthly, and quarterly kind of checks or adjustments to be made. And really, you could communicate how to do AdWords to someone very simply, and you can hire someone very cheaply who can just come in and do it with no real experience. And in fact, it was almost better that they didn't have experience, because then they didn't bring bad habits and they can just do this from the ground up. And so that really kind of was a game changer, in that it kind of got it out of my head. I had two partners at the time who did it as well, and we all kind of did it our own certain ways to create more of a productized service, but also one where like you knew there would not be any, problems that you couldn't foresee just based on letting something slip. So Asana was invaluable that way. We created template projects. We created things that were on kind of template recurring tasks. And so if you signed a client, you just started the template project with the template tasks. Obviously, some clients, that was more than enough to show wild success and then go from there. Quite a few clients, you just use that as a baseline to where you can, actually put strategy on top of, because you have the basics taken care of.
Absolutely. So you said so many good things here. So I'm going to break it down. So first of all is identifying your process, right? So what you were saying in terms of defining the minimum viable process is like you look at what are the steps, the minimum steps, or the common denominator that you have to do in order to repeat the same task over and over, right? So you basically broke down the process. You map the process in terms of, okay, how do I get from point A to point B? Those are the steps that I need to do. And you figure out what they were on, as you said, on a daily, weekly, or monthly, quarterly basis, and then create a template off of that. So that's one thing, which is extremely important. The other thing that you mentioned is that when you have that, then you can hire people and you can train them your way. And that is so true in so many industries too. Like when we work with clients, that's what we do. We map the processes, right? And we create those steps. And I have a great story from a client that they used to hire people according to experience, but that didn't really match their culture. So now, to your point, that when you actually have those procedures in place, you can hire people that not necessarily have the experience and the bad habits, or the basic now going to do it your way, and you can hire according to your culture, which we're going to talk in a second, because you have a great culture in your company. And the other thing that you mentioned is all three of you, the different partners, going that way and working on it, and then comparing it and figure out what is the template you are going to create, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how do you, if you have different people in the company doing the same thing, and each one of you start mapping the process, how do you combine it so you have one process that actually works?
So now that we're up to 35 people, we have different departments and department heads. And so of varying sizes, some people are just on their own. Some people, there's 7, 8 people in their department. So a lot of times the department head will be tasked with doing it or tasked with compiling it. We actually just had, are you familiar with the knowledge-based software Guru?
Yes.
Yeah. So we actually purchased that, and we recently had a half-day Guru hackathon where we created an Excel sheet of kind of all the cards that should be in the SEO department, the paid media department, HR, operations, stuff like that. And the thing with Guru that I really like is all cards have a subject matter expert and a verifier. So they're all the department head of the card that's a part of. And so you crowdsource this template, you crowdsource this way of doing things. And then at the end of the day, the department head who has to carry it out and train someone kind of gives it the okay and publishes it.
But I love it. This is exactly what all companies should be doing. So
it only took me 10 years. Don't worry.
No worries about that.
That hackathon was 2 weeks ago. I don't want to brag.
Okay. Well, still, it's an accomplishment. We have to celebrate that,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So let's talk now. Let's inspire our listeners to do that, right? So let's say we have somebody right now listen to us or watching us, and they think, well, Yeah, Ben, you said 3 days. How am I going to find 3 days? I don't even have an hour, right? And, I have my answers, but I wanted to hear from you. Like, what would you say to that person? Why find those 3 days? Or maybe there's a way around not having to spend 3 days also although in my opinion, you do need to take that time.
Well, so it was a half day. So it wasn't a full 3 days, but even that, especially if you're a service business focusing clients, time is money. I would say there's an old quote. Some people attribute it to Gandhi. I think a lot of quotes are attributed to Gandhi because he's a cool dude. But it was like, let's say, someone said he didn't have time to meditate for, I don't know, like an hour a day or something like that. And Gandhi said, if that's the case, then you need to meditate for 2 hours a day. I just butchered that quote, but like I mentioned, it was probably fake anyway. Point being, if you don't have time to build processes, that means absolutely you must build processes. Like that is the red alert that you have to build processes if you don't have time to do it. And so I run our sales team. And so that's definitely been something that I've worked on with them is in my weekly one-on-one with our sales director, I look at their hours and I look at where they're spending their hours. And I'm consistently looking at pruning kind of what is manual and they shouldn't be doing, and then backfilling that, which is, what is the base level kind of process work we can be doing to make sure that, if you get hit by a bus, not all of this doesn't go out the window, or, the place you don't want to be in as a service business is we're only as good as our last hire because they have to be good at everything, stuff like that. So it's just, we've decided actually that it's just a commitment we're going to make to rip off the Band-Aid probably about every 6 months is just put it on, build a process to do processes. Every 6 months, we're just going to put a half day on the calendar and you can't get rid of it. And it's going to be everyone look at their backlog of processes, everyone look at their process sheets and let's fix it.
Great. So now you're remote, so you're not sitting in one room. So how do you do that?
It would be a lot easier if we were in one room. I think for departments, it's get on a group Zoom, get your lunch out, depending on time of day, get a beer out, or, even if it's not the right time of day, just don't tell me. And
not too many because you want to write the processes.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you need to loosen up to write the process to get to dig real deep. But yeah, do it as a group, make it fun. We actually put some money up where if you contributed 3 cards, you got a share of the pot. So we put a little bounty on it, and people respond to incentives. And
absolutely. And to games too. It's a game, right?
Yeah, we gamified it a little bit, and it was pretty lightweight. We didn't, I think there's major upside to being remote, and there's major downsides to being remote. I think everyone thinks it's all one way or all the other, and processes are definitely something where it would help to get into a room physically and get a whiteboard out and put it up and talk through it. But you do what you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's talk about your culture. I look at your website, and let's also tell our listeners. So where should they find, what's the website that they can find you at?
digitalreachagency.com.
digitalreachagency.com. Very simple. Yeah. And if you look at the about, you will see the picture of the team, and you had a retreat there, right? I mean, you do get together at some point, right?
Once upon a time we did.
Yeah, once upon a time, that's right. But maybe again, that will happen.
We used to do yearly retreats, and we did a virtual retreat this year, which was really big. So I think we're going to add it into a once yearly in person, and then every 6 months virtual retreat.
That's great. And, some of our core values is, it's the honesty, is make sure that you're doing the things that are right, that it's right by your clients, etc. Tell us a little bit about that culture, and how did you build it? How did you make sure that, obviously it was important to you, because if you read your story, this was what was important for you, the experience with other agencies. didn't work very well and you said, I'm going to start my own, right? So to do it your way with what is important for you. But how do you get the team to actually buy into it?
Yeah, so the previous company that I worked for, when I started my agency for several years, and it actually still is a good rubric to think about, even if it applies less because we're bigger than they ever were. I always thought, what would this company do? And then I just did the opposite, and it always kind of worked. And so,
Yeah, so that's a piece of advice. Okay, if you're working somewhere that you are not happy with, figure. Well, it's true actually. It's a process as well. You know, you dissect what are the points that you don't like, as opposed to just in general say, well, I don't like it. Well, what is it that you don't like? How would you do it differently? And then do it differently.
I like to think of myself as a smart guy, but really what I do is just listen to feedback. I started Digital Reach just based on market opportunity from listening to people that I was selling at my previous job who all told me all their problems with the market. And I just said, what if I didn't do that? And then it consistently changes my selling process and what we offer just based on feedback that I get from taking clients off of other agencies and then, interviewing clients as to why they're leaving our agency. It's actually kind of funny. I always say that lack of results isn't even really in the top 3 reasons why clients leave agencies.
Oh, so what are the reasons?
It's always more around communication. It's always more around expectation setting. And it's communication. And,
Absolutely.
And an investment in the team itself. So getting to the culture aspect. If you have a bad culture, like your clients can tell that, we're a service business. And so people work, our product is a member or several members of Digital Reach. Granted, exercising ideally a productized process, but they are dealing with someone. If you're a SaaS business, HubSpot, their product isn't really a demonstration of their culture, it's code. And so if you have a bad culture, a client can tell. And a lot of times the way they can tell is if their contact rotates off them every 90 days because people come and go.
Right.
So for us, again, it was just listening to what do people not like about agencies that they've worked with previously? What's feedback that we're getting about what's different? And, being as radically transparent as possible, as much as possible, taking employees' side in different client conflicts, when reasonable, a commitment to, even if you don't do what an employee wants, a commitment to educating them as to why you're not doing that, as opposed to having it be some type of, order from on high. And yeah, so we have Office Vibe, which is an amazing software, which again, systematizes feedback and gives scores based on how you're doing and ENPS scores and stuff like that. And yeah, just a consideration that employees know that when reasonable, we'll always have their back.
Absolutely. Great. So we talked about culture, we talked about the systems, and the way that they go together is you created that culture and you created the systems, but now you also have the people following the system, right? Because that is part of the culture, is like you get their trust. They want to work they want to work with you. They want to work at the company because of the values, because of who you are, because how you treat them, how you treat your clients. So then if you implement systems, it's part of it. They don't feel that, systems are there in order to police us, or in order to make us work harder, or in terms of squashing our creativity, but it's the opposite, because they see how it actually contributes to them being more creative.
Yeah, an example is we use Harvest for time tracking. So everybody time tracks what they do, and we have various categories: clients, basic email, Slack, meetings, stuff like that. And we preach pretty stringent harvest usage. I am the worst at the company by far, so I don't set the best example when it comes to culture. But I'm pretty ADD. And generally people don't like it, but I think if you show them that you use it for good, like, hey, we need to make sure you're not overworked. We need to make sure that you're not spending too much time on a client that's not going to help you. Or, hey, if this client's giving you problems and you work a lot on them, like that's definitely going to inform our decision as to what we do here. And so showing them that, and we do hours projections every month, and to say like, okay, the better you do your time, the more accurate we'll be able to say, like, this person can work a standard full-time job without being overwhelmed, over the next month. And so, yeah, I think people have seen that, like I mentioned with my sales director, the more detailed he keeps his time, the better I can come in and say, oh, look, you worked 45 hours last week, let's talk about bringing that down. How do we not do that again? And so just, you combine that with a commitment to the team saying like, if we are consistently working over 40 hours a week, it must be a process problem.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And then you fix it with processes. So then people can see that the process is actually helping them. So then there is more buy-in, and then they decide to follow by all. So I think it's great.
The cheapest way to fix something is to just work harder. But it's not the best way to fix something.
No. So I think, we touched upon how to get the processes implemented is basically you make it part of the culture. It comes from the top because you're very process oriented. It's expected. So you have those meetings. You keep it alive because you have the meetings every 6 months or so you can actually review it and revise it. And I'm sure if a problem comes up or if there is an issue, then the question is, where's the process? Is there a process? Was the process followed, right? And if not, then create it. So you have those in place, and you're using a lot of systems, and that's definitely very, very impressive. So, we've worked with creative agencies, with creative people in terms of documentation, writing processes. And what we hear at the beginning is always, well, processes are going to stop my creativity. Let me be creative. I can't work with processes because I do things differently. It won't allow me to express myself, who I am, and create all those things because you want your people to be creative. So what will be your answer to that?
Yeah, I would say it frees you up to be creative. And I would also say maybe change your definition of process. I mean, we all follow a process all the time, always. When I take out the trash, I follow a process. It's not in Guru, it's not in Asana, it's just kind of in my head, and it reduces my cognitive load while taking out the trash. I don't have to think about stuff. I follow the process. And in doing so, I'm able to have a better conversation with my wife while I'm doing it, as opposed to rediscovering the wheel every time. So if you're creative, and I've done this in process writing before. How about step 4? This is the creative part. So step 1, do this. Step 2, step 3. This is where you get creative. Step 5, send it to the client. Step 6, you can say in the process, this is the fun part. But if you're reinventing it every time, the amount of stress and disorganization you have, you're not going to, protecting your calendar for a 2-hour creative thinking session. Only processes will do that. So it allows you to be creative. And that's something that I've struggled with a lot of times before as well. So you're familiar with getting things done, with David Allen. That's one of the criticisms of getting things done is you become like isn't this going to hem me in? And it's like, no, it's going to get all the stuff off your mind that shouldn't be on your mind. So then you can actually think about what should be on your mind.
I love it. Those are the exact words that I use as well. What you just described, it's exactly right. Because I tell people, you already have a process. You won't have a successful business. Like, one of the things that we do is we work with successful entrepreneurs, right, to help them get to the next level. Or if somebody wants to get their business ready for sale in the next 2-3 years, so we document, we create the processes, tell them, you won't be able to be successful without having processes. You have processes. It's just that because they're not documented, because you're not aware of them, or the team is not aware of them, you're reinventing the wheel every single time. And it's a waste of time, which takes away from your creativity, as opposed to putting the framework there. And I love what you said in terms of leaving the freedom to be creative. So it's a balance between step by step and leaving the freedom, the area to be free to create. But you will have more of that, because who doesn't want that? I mean, it's much better to have the time to be creative than time to handle these clients that are not satisfied because somebody forgot to communicate something, right? Because it could have been handled with a process.
Yeah, and that's just talking about creating processes for you. Like, I follow this process. But really, you create processes for others.
Mm-hmm.
Although, obviously they help you.
That's a very good point, because you have to look at everybody. That's why you work as a team. It's not just processes for you, but you create others so they can also understand how to work with you, right? So that's
so absolutely. It's like it makes me less creative. Okay, well that's one thing, and we can talk about that. But really, it's going to be more than you at some point. At least most people want it to be. I don't want to impugn values on someone. If you hire 5 people, they're all coming in with their own process, even if it's not documented.
Right.
And even if they don't intentionally think of it as a process, it's just kind of what they're doing that day. So you can pay 30% more over market to just make sure you get someone experienced enough to where whatever they've figured out, it just kind of works. Or you can say, this is what I know works, and I'm going to hire people that fit into this. And maybe you pay 20% less than market, just because you just need someone who's good enough to run your process. And, we've been at different points in our life. When we had to hire certain positions, we either didn't know what to do there, or we just didn't have the time to train someone. So we're just like, we just need to get someone who's good and then have them bring their knowledge to us. And then there's other times where it's like, look, this is going to be the 5th person on the team. I don't need to hire some type of badass who is going to totally change our business. I actually just need them to run these processes. And if you have no processes, everyone you hire needs to be a total badass. Now you want them to be, but in their own specific way, not in the, game changing, I make a ton of money way. So it is as much for others. And also you're going to spend your time either way. You're either going to spend your time building the process, or you're going to spend your time fixing the problem.
Right.
And you probably prefer to do it up front than to consistently, years into someone's employment, still feel like you're training them. Because when we used to hire someone, it used to feel like in a lot of companies, it still is a second job, basically training them while you're doing your real job.
Absolutely.
And I don't know where it is in terms of how much time it should take or how long it should take. I think that's too individual to say. But you're either going to set that time up now for success, or you're just going to keep shaking your fist at the sky, wondering why this person can't understand what's in your head.
That is so true, Ben. So true. And that's, we document a lot, or we create a lot of the onboarding processes for different positions, because for that exact reason of to have a training schedule, how to train a person successfully. Because if you have a good hiring process, you should be able to hire good people. If you have your culture well defined, then don't hire people that don't match the culture, right? Because you should be using testing, you should be using good interview questions, you should be able to have a good judgment of character, and just basically get people in that fit the culture that you believe that will add to the team. Once that happens, it's on you to actually train them correctly, and that's where the onboarding is so important. So I'm with you, and that's probably one of the biggest contributions to your success and having such a team is because you have those systems in place.
Yeah.
So we mentioned systems. We mentioned Asana. We mentioned Guru. We mentioned use Harvest. So in closing, let's run through some of the other systems that you use in order to automate or to make your life easier, to inspire our listeners to use that, to check those out and see if they can use it as well.
Okay. For a lot of our sales stuff, we use HubSpot Sales. And so it's very easy to just kind of create snippets in there that you can put in, templates, that type of thing. It's kind of crazy to think that that's a process too. It's kind of crazy to think how much is a process.
Right.
But like you mentioned, you're doing it or you're not. Let's see. Almost as much as possible, we have live in Asana. What do we have? We have onboarding stuff in Bamboo HR, which is our HR software. We are about to get some performance management software. I'm determining between a couple of them, where they're going to have one-on-one and quarterly review processes set up. That's kind of been a big passion of mine over the last, I would say, 3 months or so, is even something like a quarterly review. Now we have like 5 different managers, and they probably run it all differently. And what I want to emphasize is I want everyone to run them differently and run them in ways that are expressions of themselves, because it would be a little weird if I made them read a script. But I also want a process raises the floor of what's going on. So I don't want someone to be super neglected from a management standpoint just because, they're under a manager who maybe doesn't run good quarterly reviews. How do I know that? Well, I have feedback. I sit down on a couple of stuff like that. But really what I can do is just take initiative and raise the floor of what's going on in terms of those reviews.
Absolutely. And Ben, by the way, from listening to you, really using all those systems that we're now going over allows you as the owner to actually not be in the business all the time, but work on the business, because you still have the knowledge of what's going on, which allows you to, because, let's face it, as entrepreneurs, we are kind of like, we like to be in control of everything, right? And it's hard to let go. So you feel like you have to have your hands in everything in order to know what's going on. But by increasing your knowledge, by having that transparency, those dashboards, the ability to go into a system and see from the notes what is going on, you feel like you're in control when you're really not all the time hands-on in control, right?
Yeah, well, that comes down to culture again. It needs to be that combined with a team that you feel comfortable acting autonomously. And to your point, one of the things that makes you feel comfortable with that is they follow processes.
That's right. So you're creating that system. So any other systems? Just so we talked about HubSpot and Bamboo HR. Anything? You mentioned Slack and of course Asana. And anything else that comes to mind?
Those are the big ones. All of our kind of major like onboarding processes and stuff like that now live in Asana. I think we're going to be transferring a lot of those over to Guru.
Okay.
We've had a lot of internal discussions as to what Asana is for, what Guru is for, what Slack is for. And so even that, we need to create processes about where processes go so we can process them in a process fashion.
That's what I wanted to say. I created policies, those are policies and processes in terms of like, when do you use Slack? When do you use email? When do you use Asana or Monday or ClickUp or whatever task management software you're using? So it's very easy to differentiate because you have to control your communications. Otherwise, they go all over the place because then people put things in Slack that they should really go into Asana, etc. So I agree that, it's interesting because you're thinking that there should be a process about that and process about that. So do you have a place where you write, okay, processes to do you have like an Asana board that says processes to document, and just when you have those ideas you just put it there?
No, but we should.
Yeah, I suggest that's what I do because those things come up for me too. Oh, I should do it for myself, not for my clients, even internally.
I think, yeah, when that's a good idea, and I need to have it centralized because, like I mentioned, if we're going to put something on the docket for like every 6 months or every quarter, this is where we review and bang out any processes stuff, or build tasks and projects to build processes. Time to think. I should have a backlog of stuff that needs to get done. I thought about in discussing things you don't even know are processes. One thing that I've gotten really good feedback on, and when I tell it to people, they're like amazed because they're like, "Oh, that's awesome! I didn't even know." Other companies just don't do this. So on Slack, because we're fully remote, and the only way you really interact with people is on Slack or over Zoom.
Right.
It is crazy in a dystopian future. You just don't talk to anyone unless it's on your calendar.
You're describing my life. That's the way it is. Yes.
Yeah. And my wife also works from home, and I'm like, I don't have time to talk. She's like, well, if I don't talk to you, I don't talk to anybody. It's like, well, yeah, okay. Yeah. Is a really cool process. And I don't know where it came from. I think my partner, Andrew, came up with it just because everyone had questions. Here's our kind of like intraday out of office policy on Slack is if you're away from your keyboard and you're not going to get back to people. Well, first off, if you're like deep in work, you just put a gear up. And that just means I'm grinding on work all day, like responses will be delayed. You don't even have to say anything, just a gear. If you have a gear up all the time, we're going to have some questions as to what you're actually doing. But if you're just away from the keyboard, you're getting lunch, you're taking your daughter to the orthodontist, whatever it is, just put a palm tree up with the time that you'll be back. You don't even need to explain what you're doing. If you're gone for a couple hours, don't tell anybody. Just put a palm tree up. Obviously, don't do it during a client call, but we trust you enough to just put a palm tree up and do your stuff. If you're going to be gone for a half day or more, tell your department head. You don't need to tell anybody else. So let your department know, get your work covered, and then put a palm tree up for the half day. And then if you're going to be gone a full day, obviously we actually have a process to go out of office, and you put it in Bamboo HR. It shows up on the Bamboo calendar. It shows up that you're out of office, and put the palm tree up with the dates that you're out of office and when you'll be back. And so people have been really shocked on the, like, if you need to go to the post office, put a palm tree up and just say you'll be back at 11. Like, people are shocked. They're like, oh, you can do that? I thought you just had to like tell everyone. And it's like, no, like no one cares. Now,
and nicely, they do care. We really all care that you're going to the post office, but it's kind of like we don't want to be interrupted on our work.
Yeah, I hired someone who's who came from a much bigger company. And in general chat on Slack every day, they would be like, I'm going out for lunch. And it's like, dude, no one cares.
I know what you mean. I mean,
you just keep saying it. I'm taking an hour for lunch. No one cares.
Right. I have a doctor's appointment. I have this, I have that. That's right. I love that system. Wow, Ben, this is amazing. Like all the systems that you put in place, that's why you're such a success. That's why you can get things done. That's why you can spend time with your family, and you can have the balance, and you can have also let your employees have that life-work balance, is because it's systematized and you are basically living that. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest here on the podcast, on the System Simplified podcast, because that's exactly what you do, is you have systems that are simplified enough that people can follow. So thank you for all the stories.
I appreciate it. It was a good time. Like I mentioned, I didn't realize how processed out I was, but there's always more work to do.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.